Call to order the Parks and Public Works Committee on June 21st. Will the staff please know the attendance? And we will proceed on. Okay. First order of business, public comments. If there are individuals who make comment from the committee, this is your opportunity. So if anybody on the Zoom would like, please raise your hand, and if somebody who is in the Zoom will advise me when a hand is raised. If a hand is raised, we can take that. See no hands. We will continue on with approval of the minutes from June 7th, 2022, Parks and Public Works Committee meeting. Do I have any notes or revisions to the minutes as presented? Chair has none. Satisfied with
None for me.
Councilman Johnson, are you okay with the minutes as presented?
Yes.
Unless there are objections, the minutes are approved. So be it. Let's move into Agenda Bill 22083, public hearing, and resolution number 1617, adopting a 6-year transportation improvement program for the period of 2023 through 2028.
Thank you, sir. As you remember, at the last meeting, we discussed this, and staff was given direction to go back and make some edits. Staff did make those edits, and this is the updated program. We have engineer Andrew Vining on the line if you have any specific questions about any of the projects.
Can we just scroll to Exhibit A? Is that possible? No, it's just that there is in my pocket. There we go. Okay. And if I was 20 years younger, I could read that.
That I couldn't even read it if I walked up to the screen. So roundabout and Meadowbrook Way Southeast and 384.
Yes.
Is that up by the tribes building? Yeah. And so that's not our intersection. It's the one right at the road coming down into North Bend. We've had discussions before where we went out, stuck in the middle of the night and painted. The intersection was getting so bad.
Well, it's not the one at the top of the phone, it's the one
Halfway down.
halfway down, and it's a T, currently a T, right?
No, the 384, Middlebrook, and North Bend.
Okay, it is a
So
long.
it is the top.
Sorry.
That's what, yeah. So, what's the city interest in that roundabout? I think that's a remnant from the Martin Luther Day. Well, and I understand like the I-90 and all that, there is definitely, it's outside of our jurisdiction, but there's definite interest. I'm just not sure I see that level of interest at that intersection that warrants it overreaching our jurisdiction and listing on our step.
So I'm confused. What is the new school campus in the proximity? Which school is it?
I think it's not good for. They can do that.
Does that need it? Does this one need any updating?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think that it's an awkward intersection, and that was why it's a moving around about, but I don't, that was back in 2015 when that was considered, and I don't know if there's really anything to it.
Why is it still on here?
Well, I think the unintended consequence, the request was, the prior list was strictly narrowed to Snoqualmie jurisdictional things. And we advised that we had non-Snoqualmie jurisdictional things where we could put it on here basically to express our interest. Things like I-90 interchange, and maybe a parking lot. And so staff went back to review, and I think they went too far back. And pulled some big forward that, as you were saying, we're unsure of exactly what our interests there at this stage.
Andrew may have an explanation.
I would add that this is the STIP from that was approved last year. Some of the project names, such as the SR 202 corridor improvements phase 3A, may be the same project but shows up in our CIP as something, the downtown infrastructure or downtown phase 3 improvements. And we've tried to retain the names from the previous STIPs so that we're not changing the project titles, identifiers in the STIP program. I did try to update the descriptions some, as some of them did seem a bit outdated. If there's specific questions, I can try and field some of them. The Meadowbrook Way and SR 202, I believe there's still some interest in other turn lane improvements at that intersection.
Right, the one in particular we're talking about is the roundabout at Meadowbrook Way and at 384th and North Bend Way.
Yeah, and I believe I've seen that show up in the CIP as the North Bend Way roundabout.
Absolutely. Memory fails me, so I have to go back and look, but at this stage, regardless, I'm unsure why we keep that up. So my recommendation would be to take that off the list. I don't think we have a pressing city interest or need of that intersection. And it's outside jurisdiction.
Chairman, I think my confusion is maybe I just don't understand what the STIP is for. Are we just trying to get funding for projects that we need done? And it doesn't particularly matter what we write down, or do we need to be more specific about what we actually need? Are we acing ourselves out of potential funding if we take something off the list? Is that the situation that we're in? Is there any way that we can maintain our potential claim on funds while also reflecting the reality of what we need to have done as carefully as possible? Or is, as I think I might be hearing Mr. Vining saying, if we change anything, it confuses the process and slows it down? I don't know.
Well, Andrew, jump in if you want, but I don't see any reason taking a project off or putting a project on is going to be confusing to process, etc. I can tell you that this is one of the qualifications that's required for some of the transportation funds that are available. If it's not on this list for those funds, it doesn't qualify. So it does consider this to be a bit broad, but you really can't go in there with a shotgun approach and put everything under the sun. They do want a focus list on stuff that you're actually gonna do. Some of the projects like the interchange that are outside our jurisdiction, I believe that they are an asset on the list because it allows us in a crunch situation if the state makes a decision to do something wacky or come to us for our match, it does allow us to go after these funds for that component. But I believe our focus on the projects, or the projects you saw last time, those are the ones that we realistically feel have a shot for us to get funding to complete.
And those are covered within the street or project column,
I got
those projects that you're talking about.
They're in here also. We just added more projects to
Okay.
what you had last.
And there, and the determination was that it made no sense to take anything on. It's better to leave it on and have the potential of getting help with those projects.
Well, there were decisions made in the past that we didn't have the benefit of being here to know.
I'm sick of your excuses.
I know, sorry. So that's why, so it wasn't that it didn't hurt anything. They are important things that were discussed by council and directed to be on.
I would just,
You don't have the power to take them off then either. You can't, there's nothing you can do without council deciding to take it off specifically anyway.
Ultimately, yes, the council approves the list.
Right on.
Andrew, were you talking or somebody else on Zoom?
Andrew, you're muted.
sorry about that. I just had one more thing to add. I'd concur with Mike's comments, but regarding changing, making the changes, the first column, the street or project, has an identifier, and that's what I would, if the project's still on there, maybe we have a new identifier for it in the city, but if we keep it with the same identifier in the STIP program, if there's been past funding, or if they have questions about, is this a new project, it just helps for continuity in the STIP program. So I was really referring to just that first column there that identifies the different projects.
Thank you. That's a helpful explanation. Thank you.
Okay, so let me give you 20 years. So it serves two purposes. One, as you're saying, it is to indicate these are things we are looking for additional funding for, or these are our priorities as far as transportation projects within the city, and we may be asking for funding. It makes it a lot harder if it's not on the list. Doesn't make it impossible in some things, but it makes it a lot harder to get money if it's not on the list. The other mechanism, as you see some of the things that are outside of our jurisdiction that it would be wrong for us to get money on, it has been a mechanism for us to express that we have a city interest in that project, even though it may be the state's or it may be the county. The I-90 interchange, it being on the STIP, got us a seat on the planning board for that project. And that engagement has gone on, and we'll get an interchange here shortly. Shortly in,
Or 2300.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not geological time, but something else.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining
Mayor, like,
And adding to that, I know I've had conversations with PSRC and they have grant funding coming up next year. And so if the project is not on our STIP this year, we cannot apply for that grant.
so again, at this stage of the project in particular, I don't see precedent seeing me, nor do I want to have it on here as a priority for staff to put down in on it. So when we go to council, I will make a motion to have that item moved from the consent. Any other discussions on items?
Councilperson Johnson has his hand raised.
Oh, Councilor Johnson?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this was said, but I just want to make sure that it was that there is precedent for the city to help fund things that are outside the jurisdiction, like the temporary on-ramp at the I-90 interchange. Sorry if that was already said, but I just want to make sure that it was in there.
No, totally true. With that, any objection to, again, we'll have the public hearing at the beginning of the agenda, I assume, on council, and then we'll have this following shortly thereafter. Any council objection to public hearing next council and approval of the step later on the agenda?
None for me.
All right, so shaking that. All right, we'll proceed forward with that agenda bill. Non-consent. Well, I guess we could. All right, with that, we'll move on to discussion. Did you have a particular, you've got lined up, all-inclusive park?
That's actually River Fields.
Oh, okay.
That's gonna be sweet.
Did you want to talk about CIP first?
Oh, I see, Andy.
Part, that was like fun. I'm gonna slide now.
Even you want, we'll talk about the park of the CIP.
Whatever you're prepared to talk about, we need to hear about both, so.
Councilman Johnson, do you have a preference? No, and Coach, I have done all homework. I wanted to do on the CIP, so I'm probably more interested here in the park. You'll be part discussion.
So can I share my screen? Okay, so we have submitted or circulated an RFQ for the Riverview Park design. And we got a really good response. We had 12 different designs. Staff has narrowed it down to 3. We asked the vendors to make minor adjustments to their designs. For example, one of the designs had some very interesting colors that would not fit in the Riverview environment. I think it was pink and neon green. So he asked to have the colors fit a more natural environment. Another design had bamboo and animals that were not native to the area. And we asked them to theme it appropriately for the facility. So those changes have happened and they submitted these 3 designs, which we have for you today. The first design, and I have it on the screen, and I also have pictures in the chambers. They're of the same playgrounds, they're different angles. The first design is from All Play, and it has a railroad theme to it. And it is also a fully accessible design. So in effect, we would be constructing the second inclusive playground in the neighborhood rather than only having the one at Centennial when that gets built next year. As you can see in the picture on the screen, there's a large wheelchair ramp to get up into the train. And they can also access some of the other play areas, as you can see on the screen. They have the on-ramp, the access ramp, play area in the train, and then into this first circular pergola area and access to a slide. All wheelchair accessible, meaning everybody gets to play in those elements. The second area with the bigger slides is up some stairs. Legally, this is a fully ADA compliant playground as in all the designs, but this one takes it a step further by getting the wheelchair in the structure. The next design comes from Cascade, and it is also an ADA compliant design, but it does not have any ramps to get folks in the structure. There are transfer platforms, which are these platforms at the bottom of the stairs, and then per current regulations, they transfer from the chair to that platform, and then it's up to them to access the rest of the structure. This is the tallest structure of the bunch with the longest slide. It also has swing sets, and the swing sets are currently shown with fall protection surfacing bark, which would not be wheelchair accessible. So that would be one of the changes that we would be asking for, is for the wheelchair accessible fall protection surfacing. So that is Cascade submittal. And then the final submittal is the Burke submittal. It's kind of a treehouse design. There are some, there's a xylophone in the design. There are accessible, once again, transfer stations, no ramp up into the structure for a chair. But it also is ADA compliant. It also has swings, and they show bark for the fall protection surfacing. This is something that we would request to change to the surface, well, the wheelchair accessible surface. And then also there are panels that describe some of the wildlife and plants that are commonly seen in the Pacific Northwest. Due to the holiday yesterday, the PEC commission one that was unable to meet, and we really would like them to weigh in first. So we do respectfully request that you hold your comments until after they speak, because we don't want to put the thumb on the scale. But it is our intention to, and we may even hold a special PEC meeting to get this back to you quicker so we can get to work. We're going to look at calendars as soon as tomorrow afternoon when I come back early, so that we can get that figured out. But all in all, I'm really happy with all three designs. I don't think there's a bad choice in the bunch. I really appreciate the way the vendors work with us on these designs. Yes.
Yeah, is there gonna be an opportunity or any kind of notice for public to weigh in on this, for residents in the area to have an opinion on which design?
We could do a mailer as if we do not do a special PEC meeting. It could mean that the playground gets delayed till next year, because we're in the build season now. And depending on how early winter comes, plus lead time on this, but we can certainly do the PEC meeting in July and do a mailer so many feet away from the park at your discretion. If you want to say 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet, we can certainly do a mailer and ask them to provide input about this meeting and also.
But that'll delay it potentially for as much as a year.
It would delay it for at least a month, and that could put us in jeopardy. Which is why we're trying to do a special meeting.
And when would that special meeting be?
Don't know yet. As soon as I'm done with interviews tomorrow, we'll get back to the office. When Joan and I can look at schedules, we'll get that figured out.
We do have the newsletter and an email distribution for that.
We could definitely advertise it on the website and do that also.
Anybody has an opinion, that you can invite them to this meeting to come talk to us.
And if you wanted to, I don't want to speak for the administration's resources, but we also could put some sort of a voting thing on the website where people vote for their most popular design. I'm speaking for Dana, which is very dangerous, but
We can certainly work with Dana on that.
if that's something that you're interested in, we can certainly do that also.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the other members of the committee, but I'd be in favor of any opportunity that the public can have to weigh in. They're gonna, well, they've had to get into live with the last Riverview Beach Park for the last, what, 50 years? So, yeah, it's gonna be around for a while.
It's made out of plastic, so it's less than 20.
I thought you said it was from the 70s.
I'm not that structured.
Not that structure. Okay, all right.
The only other question I have is, one of the things, when I'm going on my, I'm not sure why, but just look, do we have any other place structures that we require for these businesses, and how are those structures holding up?
We have playgrounds from all three other vendors. And I believe I am aware of a difficulty with the zip line. And that is, I don't want to speak about the top. So let me research that because they're no, the manufacturer's no longer supporting the zip line in Fisher Creek Park. And we are being asked to accept the liability to replace the properties. So I'm looking at that.
That stinks. People love that zip line. I mean, I don't know how many times I've ridden on it. I can't imagine why it's getting busted.
I don't know what you do on your day job, but anyway, sitting, all right, thank you, and I guess, as you're saying, we'll hold on for the comment, let's go ahead and take a look at this, come back and advise us before we dive into too much detail on this. But very cool. All looks fun. All right, with that, let's go back to the agenda. And can we dive in on this at that stage?
So I just wanted to create another opportunity to discuss CIP amongst you. If you had any questions, Engineer Hamlin's in the house, and we have Andrew online, so we could talk about any projects if anybody has any questions.
I just want, and it's an educational, on my part. If we could sometime do a deep dive on funding plans for the community center. The numbers have changed since last time we reviewed, so I probably need to be ratcheted back in to focus. Or slap one side, whichever works. So if we could at some stage have that discussion.
Would you like us to arrange for Drew and then possibly a representative from the Y to be here at the next meeting? We can attempt to make that happen.
True, yes, I did not, the finance question. So I understand we may have them as a partner, whatever, but that's still an internal factoid to us. So I'm not pressing to have the one present. They're not arguing if they want to be, but not pressing to have the present.
And I think they would be the most able to answer questions about the design. If your questions were about that, or if it's just about funding.
Primarily about funding.
Okay,
One speed bump at a time.
no problem.
My son does several speed bumps at a time, but I didn't want it at a time. Yes.
So I thought at our CIP such workshop, Drew addressed why that page changed.
It was just why page changed from a prior figure I had seen. I still want to, for the total sum, but I still, for the, I have to add up.
I think it was like the bond that had changed, changed the interest rate on that. There's something else you're thinking of.
Well, how much is the bond? I think it was like $7. Just want to have that confirmed. Where's the rest of the money coming from? My last benchmark was we had, I believe, 9 million. I think it was 2.5 million per year over three years. We're going to be taken out of reserves to put aside for community center. You're wrong on that number. And I was looking at a total figure that was significant. That's what we're talking now. So where's the city funding coming from? How much is bond? How we plan doing the bond? And things along those lines. So my benchmark is our last conversation prior administration. Help me go from there to where we are today. And
2019, where we are here.
that's probably it was our last conversation. middle of the pandemic. We kind of,
Right before.
we put everything,
We were done how?
yeah, we put everything on the shelf, pandemic. So yeah, probably just before the pandemic.
So next Parks Public Works. We can,
If that's workable, please, yes.
So, just, Councilmember, just so I'm clear, what you're looking for is for us to start in 2019 and just kind of give you a progression forward to build the road from there to here.
Yes.
Okay.
'Cause like I said, it was somewhere between $9 and $12 million were coming out of reserves. At that stage, construction was moving at about, I believe, $20 million. Both ends of that equation have changed. And just lead me through how, how they changed along the way between that last conversation in 2019 and today.
okay, there was 30% increase over 2019 because of inflation and everything, and it's in 2023 costs. Those recent ones.
Where did my agenda go? Any other questions in regards to the CIP? Just on to Snoqualmie Parkway overlay.
I'm happy to report that the RFQ for the engineering services is out on the streets. We actually had one of the our vendors that we see a lot, Tetra Tech. They were actually on the parkway today, getting a preliminary look in order to submit for that RFQ. So this will conduct the preliminary engineering, put together the design, the plans, and the bid package. So that closes in the beginning of July. So if we can't get it to you before around the second meeting in July, it will be before council, or they aim to get it in council first meeting in August. And that project is rolling. So
We intend to do this year?
no,
Okay.
because
Technically.
because of the requirements of the state funds, it's gonna take us till next year. Or we have all those T's crossed and I's dotted. This year, at the end of the week, probably, if not the beginning of next week, we are having a piece of equipment delivered that we're gonna go ahead and use on the parkway to address some of the bad spots that have reopened with a different technology. And then we're also gonna be using it out on Mill Pond Road to address some of the issues out there. And when we're on Mill Pond Road and the upper road closes, safer environment, I'm actually gonna invite the entire council out to come and see this in action if you're available.
And we're still in discussions with the state of all the things we need to do the parkway before they take over.
Correct.
All right, well, that, we need a big one in today's world, we need to find what we mean by we.
It's defined in the municipal code. Can I share again, please? So we've been getting calls about weeds. It's is the season. And so I wanted to show that and discuss what the municipal code says, explain to you what are the deficiencies that we're working through, and then explain to you my responsibilities in this, and make sure that everybody's good. The code as section 824, it defines what weeds are as you requested, and it declares them a public nuisance. So basically anything growing off private property that obstructs the public right of way is declared a nuisance weed. Section 20 requires the property owners to keep the right of way clear of weeds and vegetation growing from their private property. On section 830, it bestows the responsibility of enforcing this code chapter upon me or my designee to go ahead and notify the owners of the obstruction, give them a minimum of 5 days to do the work. And then if they fail to do that work in that 5 days, then I would bring an agenda item before the council in order to get the approval to either do the work with city forces or hire somebody to do the work. And then require reimbursement of that amount up to and including a lien on the property. That's what section 50 does, is authorizes the lien to be placed on the property. And then there's also a civil penalty that can be enforced of up to $100 or $500 for the violation. So in addition to the civil liability for the cost, they can also be assessed a penalty. And then section 70 prescribes the appeal process. All in all, this is one of the better code sections that I've seen in my career when it comes to weeds. It's very clear, it's concise, and it's easy to follow. It's available to the public on our website. The concern is that things are done a little differently than I'm used to here in Washington. The right of way begins at the back of the sidewalk. So the park strip on the other side of the sidewalk between the street and the sidewalk is not private property, it's actually public property. Now, on Snoqualmie Ridge 2, it was in the development agreements that it was required to be maintained by the property owners, which is why the ROA maintains those park strips in Ridge 2, but not in Ridge 1 and not in that one. This represents a massive workload, obviously, for my limited staff of 6 parks employees and 2 tree employees. That's almost, I mean, it's just not possible to do the amount of work that's required to help the city limits. So that leads us to decision-making time, not today, but in the future, where we either need to increase the staff to provide that service, which is going to increase costs, or we need to amend the code to place that responsibility on the adjoining property owner. Several cities do have that code, placing that responsibility on the abutting property owner. In the meantime, I don't feel comfortable requiring a property owner to take action that's not required. So I've chosen not to, and I have had to dispatch our staff to remove several forests already. There's one tiger sighting. I mean, it was all day to do just 4 park strips. That's how overcome and impacted they were.
That were adjacent to a private property.
Correct. So one of them was a vacant lot, and the other one was a commercial property. And the commercial property owner actually called and wanted to know when we were going to go. So I am in the process of developing a proposed ordinance to make that change. And then my intention is to bring it before either the next committee or the committee after that. And then to move on to council to recommend approval of a change so that we can address this issue throughout town.
So then if the responsibility for those strips was placed on the property owners, would they then also have the right to plant it however they choose?
I will need to check the zoning code, but I'm not entirely sure that there are too many requirements on the plantings. I know that some plants have been identified as noxious weeds earlier in the chapter. They would not be able to landscape with, say, Scotch broom or plants like that, poison oak. But they would be required to have a tree. They couldn't take the tree out. But I would encourage the zoning code not to permit them to pave over those park strips. They are important and they serve an important role in the stormwater system.
So then your suggestion would be that if it doesn't involve bringing in invasive or noxious species and doesn't keep those strips from doing their job with regard to stormwater and that sort of thing, that they would have some leeway on how they plant. Not everybody wants to have a lawn across their sidewalk.
Well, let me check the zoning code to be sure, but on a professional level, I as long as those conditions are met, I wouldn't have an issue.
Well, it's also the case that right now the code doesn't state a position. His proposal is it's gonna write some words for adoption of the code that would state the responsibility of the homeowner like that. Depending on how we write that, it could include restrictions of no asterisk. What?
Well, then, to that point, I can tell you that it would be much easier for me to vote in favor of something like that if it did leave in the hands of the property owners the greatest leeway in how they use that space if they're going to become responsible for it.
Understand. And we're talking about non-Bridge 2. Because the Bridge 2 is specified in the RA agreements, how those are.
True, fair enough. Yeah.
They're also maintained, but yes, got it.
Well, and that the Ridge one has an HOA that does have some. Has stated some positions in regards to that strip of grass, to particular members of the community, whether or not they have to leave, we'd have to look, but, they have definitely, I know, at least one neighbor get the rocks out. So.
However, what we're talking about is potentially saying to residents who have lived in their homes for maybe years under one set of rules to say that now there's this new responsibility that you have to take care of. And that if that responsibility doesn't also come with some kind of payoff, then I can see people pushing back on that. And I can see not really having an argument against them pushing it and back against it. So if we are going to make a requirement of residents, a brand new requirement that they haven't had before, then I think it needs to be written in such a way that we recognize that we're doing that.
Agreed, but there was, I'm on my burn now. There was an unstated assumed responsibility on the majority of people in the Ridge, I would assume, that they are doing maintenance of those berms or total.
Fair enough, but and I think from what I'm hearing, the vast majority of the people for whom that was unstated and assumed are doing it. And there's a small percentage of people who are not. And in their defense, it was unstated. And if we're going to now assume it, then well, heck, they weren't doing it before. So all of a sudden now it is the city government coming in and saying, no, now you have to do this thing that we've decided you have to do. And that's not everybody's favorite thing. So I think that we need to recognize that people do have rights, and to impose upon them a new requirement, we have to be thoughtful about how we do that and consider the rights that they've been living under for the entire time they're living there. I'm not saying that that this is an unreasonable ask, but I think it is unreasonable to ask somebody who doesn't want a lawn across their sidewalk to now maintain a lawn across their sidewalk. So I think I've said everything that I need to say. I'm gonna shut up now, right?
There are other options too. I mean, we could expand the work through, we can maintain both sides, but I would not recommend.
Who's got their hand up there? I will entertain public comment. Come on.
This is just a quick question. So would we also be requiring the landowner then to deal with any of the trees in terms of trimming and things like that, or taking care of them? Or would that be project? Okay.
No, the trees are city street trees and our property and our responsibility.
Okay, fantastic. I was just concerned about people getting
Some
harming themselves.
Some, I got a picture, I should be noting. Some of the codes do place the burden of sidewalk maintenance on the residents. I think that's a bridge too far. I would not recommend that at this time. But the mowing and keeping the sidewalk free, so people aren't walking in the street, I do believe that there's a public safety angle to that makes a logical argument. Councilperson Johnson also has his hand.
Councilman Johnson?
Thank you. The area that we're talking about is Snoqualmie Ridge 1. Am I hearing that correctly?
And also downtown.
And also downtown. Okay, well, that answers part of my question. The other part was, I do apologize, my internet was doing some weird things there. So once again, I'm sorry if this was already said, but there's precedent for having people maintain some of the area near their residence with regard to shoveling snow. How that was all done is not something I want to relitigate, but just saying that that's a thing that is currently in our city code. So maintaining another area is not without precedent. That's not to say that it's necessarily a good thing to do. But yeah, since it includes downtown, that is definitely interesting, because what I was going to suggest was perhaps that the smaller local HOAs, I'm not sure what to call them, sub HOAs, could take on the responsibility in the ridge, but with downtown, I don't think that's applicable.
The areas we trimmed were actually downtown.
The only prior comment about things of unkept property, privately held unkept property, whatever. Do have a talk with the city attorney, chiefly in regards, I'm gonna call it the Microsoft guy house.
Okay.
That should trigger it. Took 18 months for us to decide what to do while it was invested in and there were issues with us actually taking action. I love to hear what you're saying, because that was stuck in my thought. But if we have a process and way to do that, I'd like to avoid another situation like that.
We do, and I have years and years and years of code enforcement experience, and these are some of the toughest cases because of the judicial rulings that have occurred. So I would not go on somebody's property without a warrant from judge to a big nuisance. I've done that in the past, written them, but without that tool, I think this is really good.
Further discussion? All right, with that, I believe we have run the agenda for tonight. Unless there are objections or hands, I will adjourn us. Thank you all this evening. We are adjourned.